You're listening to Dairy Voice by Dairy Business News, a podcast exclusively for the dairy industry.
One of our sponsors of the Dairy Voice podcast is National DHIA. NDHIA ensures information accuracy and represents their members' interests. They are the direct voice for the dairy information industry. To find out more, go to dhia.org.
Welcome to the latest in the series of the Evolution of the Great Cow, the series sponsored by Showbox Sires on the Dairy Voice through Dairy Business. Our series has focused on what I call the three legs we like to put under owning great cows: management, genetics, and marketing. In this series, we've interviewed many people about all three different categories because we believe there's a lot to be learned from people in these three areas. In our series, we've also interviewed several international guests, people from the Singh family at Lawal Holsteins in New Zealand to Brian Leslie to several breeders from Canada. But today we enter an international guest that I have long looked forward to an interview with because he is the true epitome of globalizing the dairy cattle breeding industry. And it's my pleasure to introduce Jan Bierma, who is the co-founder and co-owner of Holstein International and currently is the editor. And I'd like to give a big warm welcome to you, Jan. Welcome to our podcast series.
Thank you so much. Truly honored.
We're glad to have you. We're going to walk through a set of questions, Jan, to learn more about your history, the history of the magazine, and also a little bit of your views of the future of the industry. And as with every interview I like to do, ask a few questions to learn a little more about you personally. You tell us, Jan, a little bit about yourself and your history in the business.
I am born in 1960 in the Netherlands. The reason that I own a dairy farm with about 30 dairy cows. In the beginning it was a mixed farm, but at the end it was a dairy farm with 30 milking cows. And this is also how I got entered into this industry. And the passion for the industry has really started with the fact that my parents, when I was about 15 years old, I was 75, and the Holsteinization, as we call it in Europe, was starting. Italy and France were among the countries that started first with importing Holsteins. Holland was really slow to follow, and we all understand why, because, originally Holland was one of the sources, of the dual-purpose cow. They were sold all over Europe for big prices, and Holland was not so eager, especially most of the Dutch breeders were not eager to do this because they were selling a lot of cattle for high prices. Since the world was changing so quickly, Holland had to follow, and my father really was eager to start with Holsteins. And although there was a lot of people around him that say, "Oh no, we gotta wait," and we don't think the Holsteins are going to work. He said, "Well, I'm going to look for it myself." So he went with my mother to Germany, where the first Holsteins were already in place. He saw how much better the others were, how much more milk they gave, how much better animals they were. So he came back all enthusiastic. He said, "Well, I definitely know that we have to leave those dual-purpose cows. I'm a dairy farmer. I want to produce milk, and this is the cow that's going to give milk, not the old-fashioned cow." So he started quite early with that. I was young at that time and learning about breeding, and I never forget the fact that he was also wanted to go to a show. Well, females were not able to enter, but a male was able to enter. So he went with a bull to the show in Leeuwarden, which was really at that time the capital city of the dual-purpose cow. In his class, he was the only bull, so he was winning it, of course. But at the same time, lots of people around to have a look at the very first Holstein bull that was at the show. So all this with Holsteinization really sparked my interest. And when I had to do a practical course for my school, for the high school, I wanted to go to France to a farm where they had imported lots of cows from North America. And there I saw the first Paklamar astronauts, Hageman tempos, etc., elevations. And I was so impressed. Since then, I was all Holstein enthusiastic.
Hey there, after you've finished enjoying this podcast, might I recommend you join me, Tim Hammerich, and our guests on Clarity at Work from Zoetis. We'll be talking genetics and their place on the dairy. You've got a seat at the table as we discuss innovations, what's next for the industry, and more.
I have to find the value in everything that I do, and I still find value in Clarified Plus, so we're going to continue to use it.
Just search for Clarity at Work wherever you listen to podcasts. Once you finish with this podcast, of course.
Well, that's a great story. It sounds like your dad was a kind of a leader in movement, just like you've been in the globalization of our cow. Would you say you got your passion for breeding from him as well?
Yeah, from him and definitely my mother too. My father died very early when he was 42 years old. But my mother decided to keep the farm going and to keep everything with Holsteins going. She was also really interested in breeding. So the breeding was because her father, my mother's father, he also was working he was a breeder, but he was in the board of a small AI co-op at the time. So the passion comes from both of them.
That's a neat story. Like many of us, I've talked about my mom and dad and both of their influence in my career. And when you get it on both sides of your pedigree, Jan, it really does happen. I think, that sets the groundwork for your passion for the business. Tell us a little bit. Our listeners definitely want to learn about Holstein International. Jan, I would say this, one of the driving forces for Mike Duckett and I with Showbox Sires to get involved with Holstein International was our travel around the world in the past couple years. Every farm office we're in, every kitchen table we're at, every farm bathroom, you go in there and you find a copy of Holstein International. That told us it doesn't matter if it's Australia or it's Switzerland or it's France or it's Italy. Your magazine is the staple for our industry. Tell us a little bit about how this all started. Where did it come from and how has it grown?
Thank you for your comments, which of course are really thrilling to hear. I'm so glad to hear it from you, of course. We also learn this whenever we travel, but I'm glad to hear it from you. It all started kind of when I started my job. It was at the Dutch Herd Book organization where I was, my first job was 50% sire analyst, help of the sire industry, of course, and 50% editor. After a while, I learned that being editor, I really liked that. So I started after that to work for the Dutch national magazine, breeding magazine that was at that time. And I worked there for a couple of years together with my friend and now colleague, of course, Han Hopman, who is photographer for Holstein International. While we were working at that Dutch national magazine, of course, it was Dutch and we had to write a lot of Dutch stories, but I knew that there was a lot of news, of course. The big news was basically coming from other countries. Holland was just a small country. Since Holland was using so many North American bulls, we said, well, but the stories are really in North America, Canada, and the US, because that's where the big breeders are. That's where the bulls come. We want to interview those people. But in this Dutch magazine, there was not so much place for it. Owners of that wanted us to write about Dutch breeders. Fine, of course. But that was not where the big news for the breeding industry was. So then we decided to start on our own, Han and me, and we started like kind of an agency. And we started to work for 6 different dairy magazines worldwide. Holstein World was one of them. Holstein Journal was one of them. Typex in France was one of them. And we delivered stories to all of them. And we did it for about 5 years. And more, we heard people saying, it would really be nice that we do not have to subscribe to 6 different magazines to see your stories. Can't you start your own magazine? A little bit, that is how it started. So in 1993, we started working on it so that in January of 1994, the first copy of Holstein International could be published. And that is basically where it started from. And the idea here was to cover the breeding industry, breeding philosophies, and the top bulls and the top cows from all over the world. We wanted to include everybody. So already in the first issue, we had most of the continents in there. And that's how we have always progressed, to make sure that we have independent information from the Holstein industry for everybody in the Holstein industry worldwide. And that is why we started in 4 languages, but it has grown to 5 language versions. And every language version has the same content.
With over 85 projects expected by the end of 2024, California Bioenergy is without a doubt one of the leading developers of anaerobic digesters for dairy farms in the United States. Since 2006, CalBio has been forming successful partnerships with dairy farmers to create digesters that are built to last. Our CalBio team has the expertise to help lead you through the entire development process, from project design and engineering to credit generation and the day-to-day operations. With subsidiaries in the Northwest, Midwest, and Southwest, CalBio is ready to partner with dairy farmers across the country. Learn more at calbioenergy.com.
That's an important point, Jan, when we talk about it. The vision that you and Hen had to do this. But today, you said you started in 4 languages, which I think our listeners really need to think about. Think about putting this magazine out in 4 different languages for the world, and now you're at 5. Tell us, what does Holstein International look like today? Who are the leaders? Tell us a little about your staff, but more importantly, where you go, your languages, your readership, all that.
The readership is basically, we have about 10 to 11,000 subscribers worldwide, but we know that the readership is about tripled. A lot of people read it together, and we can understand that. So we say that the readership is about 30,000 people that get to see every issue. Holstein International is both printed and available digital. So if you have a print subscription to Holstein International, you can always access to it digital as well. We learned that a lot of people start, because it's a little bit cheaper, with a digital copy, a subscription, and then after a while, most of them change to a print paper version. For some reason, they say, well, to read everything on the phone or the computer, we like to have a paper version at home. So that's why that still is the majority, and that's still the engine of the whole magazine. The staff of Holstein International, which is, of course, advertising sales, which is subscription sales, with bookkeeping, which is editors, is the main office. But that sounds like very big, but there's not that many people involved in Holstein International. The main office is in Leeuwarden in the Netherlands, but we have a lot of people that do not work from the office. Like myself, I am working from my office in Sweden. Han Hopman is working from his office in the east of Holland. The chief editor, Bert Wesseldijk, is working from his own office, also in the east of Holland. Doug Savage is working from his office in Canada. The other photographer, besides Han, is Christine Masvelde. She works from her office Germany. And then there is Meinhard Huber, who is editor, and he works from his office in Austria. Yes, we are not all at one place, but we do get to meet from time to time. And things like this, Zoom and Teams and so on, make it easy to get together from time to time.
I just marvel at the different countries and the different people that you have involved, and everyone I deal with from your organization, I certainly love. One of my highlights any day of the week, Jan, is when I get the call from Eastern Ontario, and it's Doug Savage to talk about a cow family or a bull. I love visiting with Doug. He's a Aussie turned Canadian, and just a great, great guy. But your whole staff, you're all the same. You have modeled your staff after you and Han, for sure, that you want passionate dairy people, right? That's what drives you.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, dairy people, and especially Holstein breeding people. Yeah.
Another thing that I think is important as you think about your magazine, as you turn the pages of each copy, you tackle topics that are what I talk about in this podcast, of different legs that make our industry strong. I like the fact that in the same article, you can talk about a show and show cows and show bulls, but also index and AI companies, but then management and breeding tools.
Yeah.
What drives you to tackle so many different pieces of our industry?
This is what we have learned over the 31 years that Holstein International exists now. We started in January 1994. We do reader inquiries from time to time, and then we learn that that we need to have a wide spectrum of articles, as we have readers in so many countries all over the world, and all different at all different ages. We know there is a big variation in the readership, and of course there is the show readers. They like to read a lot about shows and about show cows and bulls that sire show cows. But at the same time, we have people that really are on the index side, and we have people that are on the side that they want to know the background of how our index is built and how does the breeding industry work. We like to give the background of all that. The most attractive articles, and the articles that always score the highest with our readership is herd reports. That's why we always have at least 2 herd reports from different countries in the world. Sire reports also very, very popular. And I think which contributes to that is the fact that we are independent, so that people know that we are not selling bulls ourselves or semen ourselves. So we write about the bulls as objective as we can. And we always give some pluses and some minuses. And we always say there is nothing bad of giving minuses about the bulls. That's not bad for the owner either, because if the dairymen know how to use a bull right, they will get the best results, and that's in the importance of both the dairyman, but also of the owner of the bull to get best results. So that's why we always tell, well, if you use the bull, you should take care, think about that, and take care of that, so that you avoid making mistakes there. Variation is necessary to keep everybody happy when they receive an issue of Holstein International. Even the history stories score quite high. I personally love to write them, and there is, of course, an enormous variation too. So yeah, we try to cover everything.
Well, you certainly do fantastic work. You know, I love the history stories, Jan. The problem is now many of the history stories are ones that I've lived to be part of, and that scares you a little bit, doesn't it? But
it does. Yeah, me too.
But it's great to tell, you know, I tell young breeders all the time to study those stories and study the stories of the breeders and how they came about, because and even as your discussion about bulls, you know, I've spent my whole career buying bulls, and unfortunately I haven't made the perfect bull yet. And if you can't talk about the negatives to a bull, then you certainly can't accentuate the positives. And breeding, what you guys do so well is you give everybody information. And the best way to become a better breeder, I think, is to be educated. And we thank you for that, because it's important. And keep up the good work.
Thank you.
You and I are from the generation that likes to sit down with a magazine and read it, but print publications are going out of style. Many have gone away. Why is Holstein International continuing to grow and thrive?
Maybe the fact there is, that's a little bit hard to say, but the fact that we have from the beginning made sure that the magazine is accessible, both digital and in print. And as I already explained, we still see a lot of people that start with a digital subscription that they change to paper subscription. That has probably to do with the fact that, well, there is a lot of articles, a lot of pages, and that people say, well, we can't read it all in 1 hour sitting behind a computer. There's more days involved, and happily they want to read most of the articles, so they want to come back to the issue. So I think that plays a role. I think the fact that we are independent, so what they read about the bulls and the cow families is independent, is honest information. I think that really helps. And the fact that we are worldwide, and that we like to sit right on the news. So if there is any new super bull, so to say, either genomic proven or data proven, we like to publish right away some background stories on these bulls. Because we say, well, this is like, it's like with the top players in sports. If there is a superstar, you want to know about it, and as fast as you can. And that's what we figure in the Holstein breeding too. If there is a new superstar, you like to see the background, you like to know more. About 6 months later, you like to read again about him, and 12 months again. So on the superstars, we like to be all the time there, because then they have the calves in the box, and it's just great. If you have a nice calf and you read in a magazine again about the bull, and think, I really made the right choice. I think that makes people happy.
That's what drives your magazine. Is I love your analogy to the great athletes. You know, we love to learn about them. We love to watch their careers, and our great bulls and our great cows are very similar. On the same front, Jan, the tools for breeding cattle today are sharper than they've ever been, in my opinion. Tell me a little bit your vision of how the industry has changed. Let's just say the past decade. I think we're sharper and more precise than we've ever been. Have you got some opinions and views?
I fully agree with you. I think that, as you said earlier, during our life, we have seen incredible progress. When we started in this business, it was production and type, and that was all we knew about basically how to breed cows. That's where the breeding values were. Fortunately, the industry has been taken care of, including much more. Fitness is basically the big word. I think it basically covers almost everything besides production and type. Fitness is, of course, of vital essence to cattle breeding, because things like somatic cell count, fertility, calf survival, these are really important, and they have really been improved thanks to the fitness revolution, as we call it, which started in 2000. I am personally very happy that is all happening. I know it makes the sire selection a little bit more difficult, because the more traits you have, the more traits that can be negative. But at the same time, you can make sure that the breed goes in the right direction. It has definitely gone in the right direction. Of course, we see the methane reduction stories, and soon they will be part of the total index too. There is something that you need to say all the time. Breeding for total index alone is, of course, it's a great idea, but you always have to make sure that there is a couple of traits that are important to just your farm and your herd, that you say, hey, I want to make sure that I make progress on these points, because they are weak points in my herd. And then a total index can be super high, but it still can include weak traits that are just bad for your own herd. Besides breeding for a total index, I think you have to have a look at the traits that are especially important to your herd.
I think that's great advice. In my years in the cattle breeding world, too many times we get going down one rabbit hole, and we forget to look at our cows and listen to our cows and our own personal operation of what we need, and we want to fit an index rather than what you need. So I think that's great advice to our leaders and to our listeners, because people can breed better cattle by taking that approach. The concept of making the cows as good inside as they are outside. You know, one of my historical views when I was a sire analyst 30 years ago, we did a whale of a good job making pretty cows that milked like crazy, but they were terrible reproductively and maybe not good on health traits. Today, I think we've changed them to look good on the inside and the outside. Do you have any concerns or visions of the future of what's coming next? Like, what else do we need to fix? We certainly don't have the perfect cow yet.
No, we do not have the perfect cow, and I think we never have the perfect cow, as there's always new traits coming in. But to be honest, at this point, if you ask me what else is coming up, that is when we have the methane reduction and things like that, and feed efficiency, not to forget. If we have those two things in place, we do not have to forget that the heritability of those traits is quite low. Our possibilities to make rapid progress there is a little bit limited. At the same time, because of all the other traits that we still want to take care of. We all know how easy it is to lose milk production, right? Or to lose focus on others. You read so often an article or you listen to a breeder that says, but we never have to give up on others. And we never have to give up on milk. Then there is countries where the contents or fat and protein are very important. Then we have countries where A2 or a BB catecholine are really important. So they have to exclude a lot of bulls because they want to have these traits definitely in. All in all, to be honest, if methane reduction and feed efficiency are in place and they have their own place in the total index, I would feel that we can come very close to the ideal cow. But of course, we can always make progress on all the traits together. So the perfect cow in 2030 will probably be not so perfect anymore in 2050.
And that's what drives us all. And your magazine and your business will help us become better at doing those things. So since January of 1994, when you started this crazy ride you've been on, tell me about a couple of the favorite places that you've been and a couple of your favorite interviews. And I know that's dangerous. You and I could spend all day telling stories about how much fun we've had in our careers. Can you pick a couple favorite places and a couple favorite interviews?
Yeah, favorite places. I think every country has its own charms. Of course, Italy is always a great place. And that's also where we had one of the interviews that we thought was really special. These people had not been in the news much until we made there and we had this interview and Han made the pictures. That was where Karel Farms, the breeders of Karel and Toto, the Prelude son that has, of course, contributed strongly to the breed. When Toto got big, we said, well, we never heard of this. We asked some of our Italian friends. They said, no, it's more down to the south. We have no idea, really. So we decided to go there. It was hard to find them. It was in the time there were no navigators on our phones yet. So it was really hard to get there. But it was such a nice interview to speak to those people and to see also the passion that they had for Holsteins, how they had built up. Also, they were part of the Holsteinization, even in Italy, when that took place in the 60s of the last decade. There was an interview that I will never forget. Another interview that I will never forget is it was in the where the milk tank was placed at Disu Holsteins with Darren Meyer. That was such a fantastic interview. I knew that he was not like, it was not like a guy that liked to be interviewed a lot, but we got there on a certain day, and we got there. I was in that area. He was hanging on one side of the milk tank. Me was on the other side with my book, and then he told so much. It was just incredible. Since that interview, the story, the headline of the interview was "King of Genomics." That was how he was talked about after that one. And he told me so much. It was so incredibly interesting. And it made so much sense that we were like, yeah, this guy knows exactly what he's doing. So that was one of the interviews that I was also very impressed with. And also Han said, he was whispered to me, he said to me while we were there, Jan, don't leave this place because you may break the whole interview. I said, I'm definitely not. We'll stay here until I've heard everything. And that was how it went. Great interview at a great place.
And you exposed, as the example in Italy, Darren Meyer was one of the sharpest young breeders in this industry. Getting old like all of us, Darren will appreciate that. Yeah, the exposure that you've given breeders young and old are second to none.
Piet Heffering and Hanover Hill, of course. When I was doing that, it was in the beginning of Holstein International. Of course, like to me, he was like an incredible top breeder, a person that you hardly would like to dare to get close to, so to say. So when I got to the farm, and as we all know, he was a quiet person and definitely not putting himself very high profile. So when we got there and I was able to we got permission to have an interview with him. That's how I felt, really. We got to his office, and then Pete said, you better sit on my chair because then you can write. And I was like, this is crazy. I am sitting in the chair of Piet Heffering, and he was on the little small chair for the visitors. So I felt very strange, but at the same time special because of that. And then the interview with this person was so humble and so correct and so honest. Yeah, that was an incredible interview. So also, I will never forget that.
I'm glad you bring up the Heffering story. Jan, Pete was one of my mentors, and I'll go down a little rabbit hole here. Very similar first experience. I'd gotten to know Pete fairly well, and he called me one day and said he was coming through Vermont and wanted to stop and visit with Sharon and I. And I told him it wasn't a great night to do that because our kids had a Little League baseball game. And Pete said, oh, hell, I'll just go to the game with you. I'll tell you, I was one nervous guy, just like you sitting in his chair, bringing Pete to a Little League softball game. It was but he had more fun and was yelling at the umpires, and it didn't take him long when he was done. He had both my girls under his wing headed for pizza and ice cream. So many people, I wish Pete were still alive and people like you and I could tell the story of Piet Heffering, because he was one of the most humble, successful men I've ever met.
Fully agree.
We could go on, you and I, telling stories about Holsteins and the business forever. I would like to wrap up this interview with a little bit of fun. I think people, the one thing that when you see anyone from Holstein International running around, the number one term that comes up to me is passion. And your passion exposes all your people to be the same. I have a few questions for you to tell us a little bit more about you. Let's go down the road. So when they see you this fall at World Dairy Expo, they're going to say, I know his favorite cow. I know his favorite drink. So tell us your favorite cow.
The favorite cow is a hardworking dairy cow in general, with a little bit extra type, because you want to like cows, and so the hardworking dairy cow alone is not all, but a little bit of extra type so that your completely amazed by her. That is basically what I would like to say. There is lots of cows that I really admire, but yeah, I would like to. And if I have to give another answer, it would be the Paclamar astronaut that I saw working when I was 20 years old at the French farm. That was the first 100% Holstein that I saw in my life. I was so thrilled with her. She gave so much milk. I insisted with the French farmer that I would go there, that I did every milking, morning and evening, to see how much milk she gave. And the only thing, of course, I tried to make sure that she gave more milk the next days. So, yeah.
That gives me goosebumps because that's what gave you your passion. Do you have a favorite bull?
Yeah, I have a favorite bull, which is Oman. He saved the breed, as I know it's a little bit overdone, but Oman, he has meant so much to the breed. We can also see it statistically now. All the fitness that he contributed to the breed, I think that we also have to be very happy with that. It's a hard choice. I can also say Elevation. I love the bull. And there is, of course, newer bulls that I could say, but I think Oman, yeah, very special position.
That tells a lot about your vision and what you've seen happen in your career, because a bull like Elevation, again, we go back to Elevation fixed the outside of a cow. A bull like Oman fixed the inside of the cow. And
yeah, correct.
Those are great concepts to work from. We don't have the right Showbox bull, but soon, Jan, you'll be saying a Showbox bull, I'm sure.
There we go. I look forward to it.
So if we were to meet you at a pub, will you be having a glass of wine or a beer?
A glass of red wine, and preferably Zinfandel from California.
I'll put that in my notes so I can get that for you. And your favorite...
Oh, you do not have to, but it's kind.
And your favorite food, what would we catch you eating the most?
Oh, that is hard to say because lots of things that I love, but a nice Italian pasta.
You've referenced Italy. I hope our listeners, there's so many great places to go around the world, but one of my favorites would be Italy, and it sounds like it is yours as well. If you have free time, what do you do in your free time?
Free time, I like to spend a part of it. I love walking. I make long walks if I can. But the other thing is, since our magazine needs to be independent, I never have been owning Holsteins myself. But instead of that, I've owning a couple of trotting horses, preferably brood mares, so that I can do a little bit of breeding with that. Because I love breeding, and the breeding with trotting horses is also great. And then, of course, Pete Heffering was a nice mentor there.
If you could live anywhere, including where you live today, where would it be?
I'm happy at the place where we are now. We live in the south of Sweden, and the choice of that is because there's a lot of nature, and we love this place. But there is many places in the world that I visit. I thought this is also a great place to live. So yeah.
And if there was one person in the world you could meet, a person from history or a person today, who would that be?
It may be a little bit odd, but we have been back to the place where Pawnee Farmer Landed Chief was bred. We wrote a lot of stories about this person. We talked to his children, but I thought it could be, Fissler is his name. It could have been so interesting because his passion for the breed, the way he bred Pawnee Farmer Landed Chief is, of course, fascinating. That would have been one of the people, there is way more, but that would have been one of the people that how nice it could have been to interview just him. But we were happy that we were able to speak to his, which were already at quite an age already when we met them, of course.
Those passionate breeders from that day, and you've recently done, some articles on some of the wealthy people in our industry in the United States that have owned and bred cattle, and you do a great job with that. But isn't that funny how many people in the 50s and 60s had tremendous passion, maybe more than anybody even has today? Wouldn't it be fun to get a round table with a group of those people?
Yeah, oh, definitely. That is great. As a writer, as an editor, that would be a dream to speak to them. This was the best we could do, to go to his place, to speak to his children, and to see the place where once the Pawnee Farm was. It is no longer there, but at least we saw the place.
Well, this has been a great catch up, Jan. I really appreciate your time. I think today, Jan, speaking about our global industry, I think the fact that I was able to use our medium on dairy business, an organization that focuses on more digital and voice systems to promote our industry. And then go to Holstein International, who is building one of the great archives of stories. We're all building stories in this industry. And I think it's fun that we've able to put the two together today, and we thank you for that. It has certainly been a pleasure for me to interview what I would call an absolute global icon. Jan Bierma, the co-founder, co-owner, and editor of Holstein International, has been our guest today on this edition of the Showbox Sires, the evolution of the great cow. We haven't specifically talked much about cows, but we've talked about how the cow industry has developed. And again, back to my opening comments on management, genetics, and marketing, I think, if we were to put a fourth leg under this table is education. So we thank you for listening to this episode of our series and hope you'll join us for future ones down the road.